Hi, this is Matthew Robert Payne, and this is a video called Lay Up Treasure for Yourself in Heaven. Jesus had many things to say on the Sermon on the Mount from chapters Matthew 5 to Matthew chapter 7 in the Gospels. He had many things to say, and many of the things he said in the Gospels were instructions for us to live a holy and righteous life, and a life as a servant of His and as a follower of His, and yet so few people ignore what He had to say. He said in Matthew 6:19, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal." In verse 20, "But lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart will be also." Jesus went on to talk about the eye, and if the eye is good, your body will be full of light. And then he went on to say no one can serve two masters. When we're storing up treasure in heaven, or when we're storing up treasure on earth, we have got this idea that the more we have and the more we possess on earth, the better we are. We've been sold a lie by the media and by magazines and by TVs and shows and advertising that the more we own, the better we are. The more we possess, the better off we are, and the better we will be, and the more peace and assurance we'll have, and the more loved life that we'll enjoy. But the opposite is true. Possessions seem to own us. The more we possess, the more we have to insure. The more we possess, the more expensive things we possess, the more technology moves on, and what used to be good isn't good anymore, and the more we have to spend money to keep up to date and keep up with what they say, the Joneses. We are in this constant competition to keep things relevant, to keep things up to date, to keep our technology current, so that we don't look as though we're a pauper, and we don't look as though we're unsuccessful in front of other people. So how do you store up treasure in heaven? What does a person need to do to store up treasure in heaven? What is it that Jesus wants us to do? How would we store up treasure in heaven? So I'm interested. Yes, I want to sign up. I want to store things in heaven. I want to store my treasure in heaven. How do I go about that? Well, I come to the realization that there's only one thing you can take to heaven, and that's other souls with you. You can't take your bank account. You can't take your possessions. You can only take memories of your own mind, your own intimacy with Christ. You can take that to heaven with you, and you can take other souls. Now, there's two sorts of souls you can take with you, or two sorts of treasure you can build up in heaven. One is you can lead people into a closer and more intimate relationship with Jesus Christ, and that would be treasure in heaven. The fact that you were responsible for leading people closer in a more intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. That's treasure in heaven. And when you save another soul, that's treasure in heaven. And so if you're not a person adept at evangelizing and leading people to Christ, one way to lead people to Christ and to build up your heavenly bank account is to invest in ministries that are well versed at bringing people to the Lord. Someone like Reinhard Bonnke, someone like Heidi Baker and Roland Baker of Iris Ministries. They're two great ministries that are producing disciples and producing new converts all the time, and having massive impact on the nations in Africa mainly. Other things you can do to store up treasure is, Jesus said, whatever you do in my name is treasure in heaven, or basically you'll get a reward for. So every time you give a homeless person $2, every time you give a Coke to a homeless person, every time you give a feed to a homeless person or a poor person, every time someone asks you if you got any spare change and you give spare change to the person, every time you help someone who's not as well off as yourself with some money or some food, or pay a bill for someone, every time you help someone less fortunate, this is all treasure in heaven. Most of the things that are treasure in heaven, you would be suggested. I would suggest that you don't expect a return on earth, although Jesus is good and he does return dollar for dollar, or sometimes more, to people who invest in the kingdom in other people. And he not only gives you treasure in heaven, but he sort of repays you on earth for the money that you outlay building up treasure. One way that I build up treasure on earth is that I produce books, and I allow those books to be free for 5 days out of every 90 days on Kindle. So if you joined my author page on Facebook, you'll find out which days my books are free and be able to download my books on Kindle. And I sow into spending money and producing my books so that people can download them for free on those certain days they're free. I distribute 10 times as many books for free than I do get on sales for 99 cents each on Kindle. So my purpose is to educate and draw people closer to Jesus in a more intimate relationship with Jesus. So in this way, I'm sowing up treasure, I'm storing up treasure in heaven, in increased and more closer relationships with Jesus Christ as a result of reading my books. So there's many ways. Whenever you're giving and helping someone get closer to Jesus, whenever you're helping someone live, whenever you're helping a person in the name of Jesus, you're storing treasure up in heaven. Now, in order to do all these things, to spend your time and to spend your money investing in other people, investing in the gospel, this costs money. And if you're a slave to money, if you're a slave to money and possessions, if you store up your treasure on earth and you're used to storing up treasure on earth, well then you've got to have a different mindset. You've got to come away from having your God as mammon. You've got to stop serving mammon, money and possessions, and you've got to give up that mentality, and you've got to become a friend of God and start to serve God. So it's not easy to store up treasure in heaven when you're busy storing up treasure on earth. You can't do both very effectively, and that's what Jesus says. So it says in James 4:4, James 4:3, it says, "You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures." Jesus is very aware that many Christians pray for prosperity and pray for more money and increases in jobs and increase in money so that they can spend it on their pleasures, so they can spend it on the lusts of the world, and they can spend it on treasures on earth. He goes on to say in James 4:4, the brother of Jesus says, adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is in enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. So my question is to you, Are you a friend of God's, or are you a friend of the world's? The world lives and breathes in new technology and new possessions, and people want to have a MacBook Pro, iPhone, iPad. They want to have everything current and technology sufficient and technology up to date, and all the best brands in clothing. They want the nice cars, the nice houses, and all these things cost money, and these are all treasures on earth. And in order to sow treasure in heaven, to store up treasure in heaven, it costs money. It financially costs things. It cost me thousands of dollars to produce my books, and I don't expect to ever get a recoup of that money selling my books at 99 cents and making 33 cents per book. I don't expect that $15 a month to ever recoup the thousands of dollars I spent producing the books. I do it to store up treasure in heaven, and that's where you've got to make a choice. Are you going to serve money and possessions, or are you going to serve Jesus? Jesus makes it very clear that you can't serve two masters, and he makes it very clear, and people would like to preach a gospel that says you can serve both. People like to preach a prosperity gospel that says you can serve both money and God, and you can be happy and blessed and have all sorts of the best luxury items and still be serving God. And I seem to take a different stand. Wherever there's churches that need to be built in India that cost $7,000 to build, wherever there's starving people in Africa, wherever there's needs for people where the gospel can go out and be a solid witness in these poor communities, I won't see myself in $1 million house and $100,000 cars. No matter how big my ministry grows, no matter how successful a ministry I run becomes, I'll always be spending my money on the gospel and bringing people closer to Jesus and bringing people into a relationship with Jesus. I'll always have money for the poor among that I deal with, the poor that I mix with. I'll always have a spare dollar or two for people who need my money and people who are desperate and crying and in need of something. I'll always have a compassionate heart and be giving. So you can store up money, you can store up treasure in heaven by investing your money in good ministries. If you want the name of a good ministry, ministries that I have supported in the past and continue to support, if you want a name of a ministry where you can sow your money and you can be sure that your money is getting well spent on treasure in heaven, write me a message or ask me in a comment on the Facebook video, on the YouTube video, and I'll suggest organizations that you can invest your money in. May God bless you. First of all, in closing, I don't want this message to be a message of condemnation. I don't want this message to make you feel full of guilt and condemnation. I want you to be encouraged that Jesus wants us to invest in the lives of other people. Jesus wants us to help people come closer to Him. Jesus wants us to help the poor. Jesus wants to bless us with much reward in heaven and a much more enjoyable life in heaven from all the reward that we'll get in heaven. God wants to bless other people, and He wants to use you to bless those people. So I pray that this has been encouraging for you, and you'll find your way to finding an extra $20 a month or $20 a week to invest in other people. May you be blessed, and I look forward to your comments, good or bad.